Hi, everyone. I'm Sue here in Las Vegas. I'm part of the Las Vegas Clark County Library District. I'm a youth services department head here. And I can't wait to get started with our authors today is Jen Frederick, and she wrote Soulmates. So excited. And then Sara Desai, who wrote The Singles Table. Let's go ahead and do a few introductions. Jen, would you like to speak real quick and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I am, I would say, a part-time author. I have a full-time job, and I write in the mornings, at lunch, and on the weekends and at night, basically whenever I can. And I'm from the Midwest. I'm an adoptee. I grew up here in the Midwest, and I was talking to Sue before the conference started about how everybody's experiences are so different in the diaspora, given regional locations and the people that surrounded you. So it's very interesting to get other people's perspectives. And it's part of the fun of having written these books is hearing from people all over actually the world. I received emails from people in Germany and England who are adoptees who had read the book, and it was really very thrilling.
Thank you, Jen. Sara?
Hi, I'm Sara Desai, and I live in on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and it rains a lot, as you could probably see behind me. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Was very excited to have the chance to write a series that reflected elements of my culture, and I've been really happy with hearing back from lots of South Asian readers who were thrilled to see themselves reflected in the stories.
Thank you so much. So we're excited to have everyone today, and it is a part of the AAPI Communities in Conversation, a series of online conversations between writers such as Jen and Sara, creators and librarians, myself, that center around Asian American and Pacific Islander voices, books, and cultures. This monthly program is hosted by the University of South Carolina's Augusta Baker Endowed Chair, Publishers Weekly, and Penguin Random House Library Marketing. I'm thrilled to be with all of you today. I'm very excited. I very much enjoyed these books. It was a nice break from the stresses of life that are constantly happening right now that we didn't anticipate to happen for, I think we're going on 3 years now. So it was such a lovely break. I literally laughed out loud at your books, and I want to thank you both for that. So let's begin with, if you want to do a quick introduction of your book, Sara, The Singles Table.
Yeah, the Singles Table is the third book in a series about a very large South Asian family that lives in San Francisco, and the two main characters, the one, Zara, is loosely connected to the family from the other stories, and she's a real firebrand. She's one of these people that speaks, pretty much says anything that's on her mind. She's very outgoing, very bubbly, and she was based on a person that I knew who was just somebody who walked in and would light up a room. And she is a lawyer, struggling to find her place because she doesn't really fit into the corporate world. And she meets this very grumpy ex-military security guy, and they do not hit it off on a paintball field. They have very clashing personalities, but they wind up deciding to get together to help each other out. And their story is sort of a grumpy sunshine trope story, and it was really fun to write, really enjoyable, and probably she's the character that I've written that I enjoyed the most.
I love them both. However, I do connect much more, not with Zara, because, but do you have anyone in your personal life that you're basing it on? Because she is very charismatic.
It definitely was. There was a lawyer that I worked with many years ago, and she had that type of personality. She would walk into the office and suddenly the office would just liven up. Everything she said, she would just say things off the top of her head. Even in court, she did it, and actually it worked for her in the courtroom. But yeah, I had always wanted to write somebody like her, and so that was my character, Zara.
Yeah, she's like one of those people you always want to have as a friend.
Absolutely,
like,
yeah.
Do the girl chat and like have lunch with and be like, this is what happened, and she'll always have the best advice and the most fun advice.
And a very curious person. You know, she was always willing to try something new or do something. Yeah.
So, which brings me, she probably would be willing to do the food truck. Jen, if you wanted to do a quick introduction of your book as well for SEOULMATES.
SEOULMATES is the second in a duology, but Publishers Weekly said that you can read it on its own. So it's about a Korean adoptee who goes to Seoul to find her birth family, and she falls in love with her stepbrother, which is really frowned upon in that society. Her mother is running the family her biological mother is running the family corporation, and it becomes a huge scandal that the mother had given up her daughter for adoption. And so Hara, the adoptee, agrees to work at this corporation and become part of the family to save the corporation and her mother and her stepbrother's company. But she has struggles acclimating. She doesn't know the language. All of her coworkers hate her, and she doesn't feel like she fits in Seoul, much like she didn't feel like she fit in her home in Iowa. And so it's a story about her finding herself and her own family. She creates a number of very wonderful friendships. And so it's a story about the family that you make, or the found family, which is one of my favorite tropes. And I have to say, I really love the sunshine grumpy story. And I also agree that Zara is a person that you would want to be friends with in real life. Like, she's just so fun.
Would you consider both of your books like that romantic comedy? But there's parts of both your books that have a serious tone where, you know, people are finding themselves, and there's culture, and there's a struggle, and there's some identity, you know, finding your identity, and you're, you know, trying to become yourself, basically. That takes on a serious tone in the book, I believe. What do you think, Sarah, do you think there's something in your characters that you saw in your own struggles and finding culture and identity, and, you know, having that growth, I guess?
I think there's always, you know, a cultural struggle, and that was something that I wanted to bring out in the book. But also, I wanted to show a South Asian family living in America, and that, you know, she could embrace her culture there, but also be American, and that, you know, she wasn't, I guess it was the struggle of defining yourself with two cultures, and also, you know, growing as a person and getting over past trauma. And you know, I grew up in a very small town in Northern Ontario, and there were very, very few South Asian families in the town. I think there was maybe 4 or 5 families there. And for when you're little, you don't notice that you're different. It's only when you get older or you get to high school and then the bullies start coming out and they start pointing out that you are different, that and it makes you start to wonder about your place and makes you wonder about, where you fit into the society. And, it's all those types of things, I think, that I was trying to bring into the story, all those types of feelings that you have, and also the feelings of somebody, as you're growing up and you're trying to find your way and trying to find your, it's a romance, so you're always wanting to try and find your heart as well.
I'm just curious, have you personally had experiences being set up? Is that something that you can relate to in the book?
Yeah, it didn't happen more than once because I wasn't really interested in that. But my dad, we were in our town, and I think we were teenagers. So there's 5 kids in my family. There's 4 girls and my brother. Anyways, one weekend, some family showed up and they had 4 sons by chance.
Oh.
And we didn't know that we didn't know they were visiting. We didn't know who these people were. And suddenly my dad's like, oh yeah, here's my friend. He's just, come from the States with his 4 sons. And I was just like, oh my God. And I just said to him afterwards, yeah, that's not happening again.
There's similarities there where, like, in Korean culture, same thing, where you want to be set up with the best. On the outside, you're either a lawyer or a doctor or something presentable, and you guys both speak of that. Jen, as a Korean American, I'm overwhelmed by the change in art, literature that's taken place, and perspective. It's exciting to see the words on print, like 부장님 and Chijinbang. I get chills because it's like, it's not how I grew up, right? I've never seen that in print. I've never seen people like myself in print, or even close to it, of a person of color. What inspired you to write about Korean culture? Was there something that, really sparked it? Because I feel like it was a little bit of a departure from your previous writings.
It was. I'd actually kind of taken a break from writing. I had written with a friend of mine several books in a short period of time. I was really burned out and kind of struggling to find ideas or something that interested me. And writing about Koreans or even Korean Americans hadn't even occurred to me. I mean, when I started writing, I wrote about white protagonists, both male and female. Because that's what I read, and that's what was represented in literature. And the only time I remember reading about Asians, Koreans, would have been in some fairy tales that my mother had bought me when I was very young, or side characters. So it just never occurred to me that was something I could do. But like you said, I think that the world really changed. I attribute the rise of Korean culture in America a lot to the group BTS, because I feel like before they came along, we had food and we had face masks, but we didn't have people on the stage that looked like us. And I think that their massive popularity, and then the number of fans that became interested in Korean food and in Korean landscapes, and even the language changed because of them. And that opened a market for me to write a story about Korean. And because I'm not a Korean, I'm a Korean American, I couldn't write about a Korean in Seoul unless it was a Korean American in Seoul. So that's kind of the genesis of how that story came about. Plus, I'm a huge K-drama fan, and I thought, why don't I write my own melodrama?
There's some, like I said, there are some similarities between the cultures. For example, Sarah, in your book, I don't want to quote it so much that I'm giving anything away, but the arts were low down on the list of desirable DESI professions. And that's similar to the Korean culture. You know, my parents don't proudly say I'm a librarian. It's more like, yeah, she like graduated. So it's more like, so I don't know. Do you both feel like, I know, Jen, you are a Korean American, and it's a little bit different, just like me, I'm Korean American, but I was born in Korea. Do your families have a certain amount of, I guess, or are they careful with their choice of words of your career as a writer because it's more in the arts, or do you think they're very proud of it, or you know, or do they choose to just kind of ignore it? Jen?
Well, for me, like Sarah, I'm a lawyer, so you know, I have an acceptable profession, and that's what they would focus on. But that was never a concern. Like my parents were Methodists, and they didn't really have that kind of pressure. My brother and I are both adopted, and we put pressure on ourselves because I think a little bit as adopted children, you want to prove your worth all the time, and so, you know, getting good grades was just part of, I'm proving that I still belong here, that you made the right decision years ago to bring me into your family.
Sorry, that it's kind of heartbreaking at the same time to like have to prove, you know, and but I think it's the same thing as trying to prove yourself in like the American society, saying, you know, I'm not an outsider. I too can be part of you guys and, you know, contribute. Sarah, would you have anything like, I know, oh, also, I did read that you were a librarian. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that's very exciting. Really quickly, where did you work and how long?
Oh, we had one library in our small town, and I pretty much lived there. Like I loved reading, I loved books, and we couldn't buy books, so that's where I spent all my time. And then when I got to be, I think 12 or so, the librarian asked me, did I want a job, you know, shelving books. And then I started with shelving books, and over the years, I got to move up and I got to stamp in the old days, you know, with the stamp people's books out and help choose the books. So, and then when I came back from university in the summer, I worked there for the summer as well as a summer job. So it was a huge part of my life, and, you know, a great one. You know, I loved working in the library. I love the smell of books and just the sounds. Yeah.
What first, and this is for both of you, what first inspired you to write about romantic comedy? Jen?
Well, I think Sarah is a much funnier writer than me, and I wish I could conjure up the scenes that she did. The paintball scene was so funny, but I actually think that comedy is really hard to write because it's really so subjective. Like there's certain things that can make almost anybody cry. There's universal things that can make people cry, but humor is not universal. But a story that's sad all the time isn't very entertaining either. So I think I would characterize my writing moments as more lively than comedic. Like I try to create circumstances where the characters, when they're interacting, are either having fun, or if they make mistakes, that it's hopefully amusing mistakes, and that people can kind of share in the embarrassment of the moment.
It's relatable. You can see yourself in that
Yes.
situation. Yeah, I see it like playing out, both of your books actually, like playing out like a movie. And I see all the characters interacting, and it's very vivid for me personally. I thought that's why it was so enjoyable. And there's moments where, like in Sarah's book, she said she was looking for a human equivalent of a succulent. And like that really was so hilarious to me. I laughed out loud, and I just enjoyed so much of both of your books, especially Soulmates. The end made me like really kind of a tiny bit sad, to be honest, because I wanted more, but I did feel a good amount of closure with both of your books. What would you say is more difficult to focus on writing during a pandemic? Would you say it was more difficult, or would you say that it helped you stay motivated? Were you able to be in your office and locked away because there is nothing happening in the world? And would you do it all over again if you had to write during a pandemic, Sarah?
Well, I have 3 kids, and
Oh.
when they were at home, it was not a good time to write. It was very stressful, and it was hard to be funny, like because things weren't funny, and and then you also miss like things that I find funny. They come from life. You walk down the street and you see something amusing, or someone tells you a story about something that happened. The paintball scene, I did go to a paintball bachelorette party with some friends, and some of the things that happened in there, found their way into the book. But when you're in the pandemic, I found, I was inside all the time. I wasn't interacting with people. I wasn't hearing their stories. I wasn't seeing things. And then there was, the kids at home who were constantly bored and needed to be entertained. And so I found it a real struggle. And I had thought at the beginning, oh, this is great. I'm going to have, I'm not going to be spending my time driving around, running errands, I'll have all this time. But in fact, I think your brain just can't focus for that long, and you need those diversions, and you need that stimulation to really get things going. So, yeah, I certainly wouldn't choose to do that again.
It's so true. I had a whole set of goals to do. Like, I'm going to learn another language. I'm going to start knitting. I'm going to do all these things. And none of it happened. I barely was able to, get dressed in the morning.
Yeah.
So I can totally understand. And, with a little one at home, it's like, you have day to day, you have to do all the things that get you through. And there's no time for, the extras. Jen, what would you say it was really difficult, or were you able to focus?
I agree. I didn't have the same challenges as Sarah, and what a superhero you are to have made it through with 3 children. I have a teenager, and she's very self-sufficient. But I agree that it kind of sapped your creativity. Without going out and doing things, it was hard to conjure up the interactions between your characters. Without having interaction with other people, I kind of wondered, I kind of lost my vision of how people interacted. I watched TV. I watched way more TV than I ever did. And it really kind of looked at how people were, the dialogue and the interactions between them, because I think I had forgotten what it was like to interact with people.
I think that was one of the best parts of both of your books, was the mention of all the food. I enjoyed it. So, as a matter of fact, I think I brought a banana milk with me today. An Indian restaurant opened just down the street from me, and I just, enjoyed that so much, because I don't go to restaurants currently for the safety reason. And reading about the interaction, I just was like craving both of the foods so much. Is there a particular food that you both enjoy that you cannot live without, and during the pandemic, you would say almost it helped you get through it? Sarah?
There was a lot of food I ate during the pandemic. I don't think there's anything in particular. We did a lot of baking. I have to say, we did a lot of baking, and that was everything I enjoyed. So, but I think we did a lot more Indian cooking as well. When the kids were younger, I didn't really introduce them that much to the food, but as they got older, especially when I started writing this series, and I wanted food to be such a big part of it and such a big part of the culture. we started doing a lot more cooking at home, and I, I wanted to practice the recipes that we did in the book and make them as people were making them, so that I could make sure they were authentic. So we did have a lot of big mistakes.
Both of your descriptions of the food was so good. You can just you can completely, envision yourself there eating it. And especially Jen, the food truck with the fried goods, I was like craving it, which is terrible, but it was such a good description that I was like, oh, I wish I could have that. And so is there a particular food that you enjoy? I know you grew up you said in Iowa, but
I did. Well, my mother actually did try to cook quite a bit of Korean
that's
food, and I do have my own Korean comfort foods, but I really love kimchi jjigae. My husband makes it, and we probably have it once a week, and I think that's probably my favorite dish. But I eat a lot of kimchi, and I break the rules of traditional Korean food, and I actually eat that sometimes as my main dish with just rice and some dried seaweed, which I know is not appropriate or could consider it a real meal in Korean culture. But when I was in Korea, the food there is just, I mean, they have just a tremendous food culture, and you can get anything. So I probably miss their fried chicken the most.
Yeah.
Korea has just great fried chicken, and it's hard to make. Kimchi jjigae is really easy to make, and fried
Right.
chicken is not so much.
It's not. I don't know. There's something very, very unique and crispy about it that they can't replicate. Even the ones in America here, they can't seem to replicate that. Do you think? I'm so sorry. Do you think when none of us predicted COVID to last this long, and how the pandemic has affected your writing, what are some of the other ways you drew inspiration when you were in just home? Sara, you said that it was hard because you never got those interactions, and you struggled to find that kind of everyday life. Where did you seek it to help your writing?
I watched a lot of rom-coms. I watched all the old ones and all the ones from the 80s and 90s. I thought the kids would love them, but
They
that
don't.
things
Yeah.
have changed.
They-
Things that oh, I can't remember which one it was. I showed them. Oh, The Sure Thing. I thought, who does not love that movie? I'm dating myself. But anyway, yes, all my kids hated it, and they thought everything was moving too slow, and they were shocked at all the references to drugs and
Oh,
all the swearing. They weren't used to all that, and so I watched them alone.
how about you, Jen?
I watched a lot of YouTube. I watch Korean vloggers. I watch, there's a couple channels that do street foods. I watched so many videos of those. I just watched a lot of YouTube to kind of get there's a person that does walking videos. So like they're 40-minute long, walking around Gangnam or walking around Seongsu. So I would watch those to kind of get I've been there, so I know I have some experience, but to get the descriptions of like alleyways and I would pull those up and I would watch those and I would write down what I saw so that I could try to get the feel of the city as authentic as possible.
That makes sense. I could see that. I wanted to thank you for also describing the Korean language as such a beautiful language. And growing up, I was taunted and I couldn't speak it outside of my home, but my parents encouraged me to speak it so that I can retain it. And now I have Koreanglish, which is kind of a not so good Korean, but at least I speak it. So I have no words for that. It's just, again, I enjoyed both books so much for having that, people of color, and having that I was able to see some of myself in both cultures, and you don't get that growing up. And I'm so excited for my own daughter to be able to get that. You also have some excellent discussion questions in your reader's guide without giving away too much. Oh, you did describe this. what are some foods from Iowa that you would crave?
Well, I love apple pie. Is that is that an Iowan food? I don't know, but my mom and grandma used to make pies out of lard. And so I really love pies made out with the crust made out of lard. I don't know, is that a Midwestern thing?
I think it is,
There's
and
just
then
there's just something about the flavor of it. And I've made pies with butter and other types of fats, but I really love the lard pies. That's probably one of my favorite meals. And everybody who knows me knows I love apple pastries. And a friend of mine actually will go to the Paris Baguette in New York City whenever she visits, and she'll buy the apple pastries there and ship them to me.
oh, they're so good. They're so good.
Yeah, they really are.
Sarah, like I said, I could see both books playing out like a movie in my head. Are there any actors you could see playing some of your characters in real life?
Yeah, I definitely, I kind of saw Dev Patel as
Yeah.
Jay,
Yeah.
and oh my God, I forgot her name. Kate Sharma, who's going to be
Yeah.
doing Bridgerton. Yeah, I saw her as Sarah.
It's so awesome because I just watched the SAG, or I didn't watch the SAG Awards, but I saw the winners and I got so excited because like the Squid Game actors, took away so much of the spotlight there, and that was pretty amazing. Jen, do you see any actors playing out your roles?
I actually talked to a friend of mine who's a Korean American about this, and we thought that Crystal from FX would be the only one we could think of because she would speak really good English. For the male actors, I mean, I love Park Hyung-sik. I think he would be a perfect Yujin. He just has that kind of tenderness about him that I saw in Yujin. I think Park Hyung-sik is able to carry off that kind of he just is very much the male lead without being overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to describe it. I actually think Dev Patel has a little of that.
Mm-hmm. Agree. How do you think the culture you're brought up has impacted your writing? Do you think if you were writing this, say, in the 1960s or the 1980s, it would receive the same response? Sarah?
I definitely think, writing South Asian families, back even 10 years ago would not have received the same response. Because I used to write under a different pen name. So I wrote about 20 books, and the characters were all white characters because, like Jen said, that's what I read. And I never even considered writing South Asian characters 10 years ago. So, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I just don't think that the market was there, that people were accepting of it or even, just interested in publishing that type of story. So and it was only when I saw that there were some groundbreaking, romance authors, Sonali Dev started her series, and people loved it, and the South Asian readers were saying, hey, we want more of this. We want to see our stories reflected in romance. That shift started to change, but certainly I wouldn't have even considered writing it 10 years ago.
Jen, do you agree?
Oh, definitely. I mean, part of me thinks maybe if I wrote it, people would read it, but I don't know. I think the market is different today, or I know the market is different today, and it's more expansive. And I, as a reader, am really enjoying all of the broad cultural stories that we're getting, because I feel like they're different. You know, where Sarah's story about the aunties and the Southeast Asian families are different than what we have read before, and it's in these other voices and these other cultures are really enriching our community. I, as a reader, am enjoying it so much more.
I agree. It's not just that you're talking about the culture, but you're just the main point is you're telling a story, and that happens to be, people of color, and it's such a nice way to, like, introduce it, because if you think about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, people were making fun of Indian food or Korean food and the smell, and now it's blown up, and it's like on every corner basically. Well, maybe not in Iowa, but definitely in Las Vegas. Las Vegas only had the one like Asian restaurant 20 years ago or something, and now it genuinely expanded everywhere. We have all sorts of different cultures everywhere, and it's just exciting to see that being accepted. And BTS sold out even before I think people knew it was announced, which I don't even know how that's I don't know how that's possible, because they're coming here. So I think you're right. It's a huge deal, and it makes us huge progress. What are some books you have both been reading that have diverse characters that you might want to recommend to our audience?
I just finished Nisha Sharma's Dating Dr. Dill, which was a great story. I was also, I'm not, and Sonali Dev's in Sense and Sensibility, which is, her take on Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. And I just love all her books. So those are the two that I've just finished, and I would definitely recommend them.
I was I can't find the book that I just finished, but I'm actually reading quite a few nonfiction books right now, and I don't actually finish those books because I'm just doing some research for for a book I'm writing, so I don't have any good recommendation. But I love Sara's book, and I think everybody should read that one.
Sarah, really quickly, I don't need to your background, is that your backyard?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I wasn't sure if it was virtual. It's so gorgeous.
No.
Just wanted to
Actually,
know.
let me plug Born in 1982, but it's by a Korean author. And have you read it, Sue?
Mm-mm. But it sounds like it was meant for me.
It is about, it's Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Cho Nam-ju or Cha. And it's about a woman's experience living in Seoul and the patriarchal system that she grows up in, and how it kind of feels helpless for her. And it's very moving, and I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, I didn't know. I don't know if this is still today, but I didn't even know stepbrothers and sisters could not get married in Korea.
Well, I think they can, but it's
Okay.
very frowned upon.
Extremely frowned upon.
Yes, the story, in the very first book, she is going to a funeral, and she runs into, so in Korea, funerals happen in kind of like these places that have many rooms in them, so like a hall, and so there are a lot of funerals happening at one time, and there's a funeral for a young couple that had killed themselves, and that is actually a true story, that there's a couple who were related, but they were like second cousins, and the intermarriage between clans. So if you're a certain type of Yang, you would not date another Yang. You would date a Kim or a Cha, or there was reports, like there was a news report where someone said in college, if you meet someone with the same last name as you, you just don't ever talk to them again, because what's the point?
Right. Oh my gosh, so hard. We just have a minute here and we're going to field some questions from the audience. If you could bring one character to life, Sarah, who would it be and why?
I would bring Zara to life
Yeah.
because she was so
Me
fun.
too. Me too. I love her. I can totally see her too. Jen?
Well, I think it would be Eugen. I think he's just such a wonderful character, so supportive, and has that gentle masculinity. I just really enjoyed writing him.
And so charismatic. Like I'm not used to seeing an Asian male presented in such a, powerful way, being so attractive and, placed on it's always been that white male lead. So it's like, it's nice for me to see that. And yeah, I can understand the charisma behind that. We're going to field some questions from the audience. Give me one moment. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and just direct it to the chat. And in the meantime, which scenes in your novel bring you the most joy, Sarah?
Well, by theme, like tropes, or
Yes. Well, I mean,
I love enemies to lovers tropes. I think that's probably my favorite. I always love the conflict, and I do love a grumpy sunshine.
yeah.
I do love those grumpy guys.
Jen?
I love the grumpy sometimes trope too. I actually think one of my favorite ones is friends to lovers. So it's I like that relationships that are grounded in friendships grow into something more powerful, and I feel like there's such a good foundation for happy ever after then.
If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what do you think it might be?
I still feel like a young writer. I feel like every day I'm learning something new, and when I read other people's books, I'm like, gosh, I wish I was as good as that person in doing X. But whenever people ask me for writing advice, I always say write every day. I feel like writing is a muscle, and that you need to exercise it, and the more that you work it out, the better it becomes. And so I just recommend everybody to write every day, whether it's 100 words a day or 200 words a day or 500 words a day. Just set yourself a little goal that you can achieve and meet that.
Sarah?
I think I would tell myself not to be afraid to try new things, sometimes you get inspired by something and you think, well, no, I'm writing this contemporary romance, so I should only, I should stay in my lane. But I think I would tell myself to be, very adventurous, write something paranormal, write whatever moves you on the day. And even if it's not in your lane or it's something way far out, because like Jen said, it's exercising that muscle. And it doesn't matter what you're writing, so long as you are writing something.
We're gonna. I just have one last question for both of you. If you couldn't write, what other, besides all the accomplishments you both have had, lawyers and librarians, what other career would you love to explore, Sarah?
Oh, I would I would want to be a dancer. I always wanted to be a dancer, but my dad was very religious and didn't believe that little girls should be on a stage. So it was something I was never able to pursue. So I don't know if that would be my top career. Don't think I could manage it now, but you can always dream.
Jen?
I would want to be a travel writer. I love traveling, and so being paid to go to new places seems like the ultimate dream.
Rick Steves, having to eat all the different foods. We have a question we're going to close out with from the audience. Do you have a must that you put in your books like an Easter egg, Sarah?
I don't think so. Every book is different and it's got its own flavor and it's yeah. So I don't think I have something that I put in every book.
I don't have anything either. The thought had never even occurred to me, and now I'm like, maybe.
Planted the seed. Sarah, Jen, thank you so much. I'm so excited that I got a chance to meet you both, well, virtually, and speak to both of you. I very much enjoyed your books. They're just such a nice break, like I said, from the rigors of reality right now. And thank you to our host, Dr. Nicole Cook, the University of South Carolina's Augusta Baker Endowed Chair, Publishers Weekly, and Penguin Random House Library Marketing, and a very special thanks to all of our audience. We're so glad you were able to be with us today. The webinar recording will be shared with all registrants, and we hope that you'll join us for the next AAPI Communities in Conversation, which will happen April 5th with guest author Sheldon Simon and Michelle Young of Wyma Public Library. Thank you again so much. You guys have a wonderful day. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.